Genevieve Stone's champagne flute froze halfway to her lips when she saw the deed. Not hidden in a drawer or tucked inside a briefcase. No, Alaric had left it on his desk in the penthouse office, bold as a confession. Transfer of property. The Stone estate, historic grounds and manor house, to be held in trust for Baby Hale. Due date, March 2026. Her husband had signed over their legacy to a child that wasn't hers. To a woman who'd been nothing more than a graduate student interning at their foundation 6 months ago. The same child Genevieve had sacrificed everything to give him. 5 rounds of IVF, 3 miscarriages, years of specialists who looked at her like she was broken, and Roxanne Hale had managed it in one careless night. Footsteps echoed across the marble entryway below. His footsteps. Alaric's voice drifted up the spiral staircase, rough and low. "Jen, you home? We need to talk." The paper trembled in her hands. She had seconds. Confront him now and shatter the illusion of their perfect marriage in front of whoever he'd brought with him, or fold the deed back into his drawer and plan her next move like the tactician she'd been trained to be. What she chose next would end one of them. Welcome to Empire Stories. We advocate for peaceful families and the respectful treatment of women, and our goal is to help build a society where every woman feels valued and happy. Please subscribe, like, and share our videos. Your support helps us keep doing this and spreads the message far and wide. Genevieve Stone had spent 7 years building an empire from the shadows. While Alaric played the tattooed kingpin in his custom suits and blood-stained Oxfords, shaking hands with politicians and breaking bones in equal measure, Genevieve had been the one turning his brutal reputation into political capital. She transformed his New Jersey crew from dock workers and extortionists into a legitimate foundation with ties to Trenton, Newark, and every power broker worth knowing. Their penthouse overlooked the Hudson, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Manhattan skyline like a kingdom laid out for conquest. Italian travertine imported from Tuscany. A chandelier that had once hung in a French chateau, its crystals refracting light across walls lined with art worth more than most people's homes. Everything in this space screamed power, precision, control. But tonight, arranging white orchids in a lilique vase, Genevieve felt the wrongness creeping through her ribs like frost. It had started small. Alaric's phone buzzing at 2 a.m. with messages he'd delete before she could see the name. Board meetings that ran until dawn. That new softness in his voice when he thought she wasn't listening. The tone of a man talking to someone who made him feel things he hadn't felt in years. "The Newark expansion is more complicated than we thought," he'd said last week. Those storm-gray eyes skating past hers. "These things take time, you understand?" Genevieve understood power better than most women ever would. She'd been raised by an Irish mob lieutenant who taught her that loyalty was currency and reputation was armor. She'd married into the Stones not for love, though that had come later, dangerously, but because Alaric represented territory, influence, and a name that opened doors her family's history had welded shut. What she couldn't understand was why every explanation from her husband's mouth lately tasted like a lie. The private elevator chimed. Genevieve smoothed the black silk of her dress and caught her reflection in the antique mirror that had cost more than a surgeon's salary. Even at 38, even after years of failed pregnancies that had hollowed her out from the inside, she was still beautiful in that sharp, untouchable way that made men want to conquer her and women want to destroy her. Her pulse kicked up despite everything. Alaric still had that effect. He stepped into the living room, and the air shifted. Alaric Stone was the kind of man who made oxygen feel scarce. 6'4", contained violence in a midnight blue suit. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved by someone who understood brutality as an art form. Tattoos crept up from his collar. Serpents and scripture, promises and threats inked into skin. But it was his hands she'd always loved most. Those brutal, scarred hands that had built an empire and held her like she was something sacred. Genevieve. Her name in his mouth sounded like a warning. "You're home early," she said, setting down the orchid stem with surgical precision. "I wasn't expecting you until after the Newark meeting." The meeting got moved. He crossed the distance between them, but didn't touch her. That was new. Alaric always touched her. Possessive, claiming, reminding her and everyone else who she belonged to. Tonight, he kept his hands in his pockets. "There's someone I need you to meet," he said, and Genevieve's blood went cold. "She'll be here in 10 minutes. She? Roxanne Hale. You remember her. She interned at the Foundation last spring." His jaw tightened. "She has some concerns about the gala funding that I think you should hear directly." Genevieve remembered her. 26, brunette, beautiful in that effortless way that didn't require $700 facials and personal trainers. Smart, too, graduate degree in nonprofit management, ideas that had actually impressed the board. Ideas that had apparently impressed Alaric in other ways. "Of course," Genevieve said smoothly, though her mind was already 3 moves ahead. "I'll have Rosa prepare coffee." "Jen," Alaric's voice cracked, just slightly, "I need you to keep an open mind about what she has to say." The elevator chimed again before she could respond. And when Roxanne Hale stepped into their penthouse, she wasn't hiding anything. The woman wore a form-fitting navy dress that clung to every curve, every change in her body. But it was the swell of her abdomen, unmistakable, deliberate, 6 months of new life, that made Genevieve's world tilt on its axis. Roxanne walked across the travertin like she owned it, one hand resting on her stomach in a gesture so possessive it could have been a declaration of war. She stopped 3 feet from Genevieve, close enough that the scent of her perfume, something young and expensive, filled the space between them. "Mrs. Stone," Roxanne said, her voice steady, unflinching. "I'm glad we're finally having this conversation. Alaric and I have been trying to find the right time to tell you." She placed both hands on her belly now, a shield and a weapon. "He's already put the estate in trust for the baby. Our baby. I thought you should know before the lawyers make it official." Genevieve's gaze slid to Alaric, who stood in the shadows by the window, his tattooed hands clasped in front of him like a man at a funeral. He wouldn't look at her. Couldn't. The champagne flute in Genevieve's hand grew slick with condensation. She could feel the crystal stem bending under her grip, could imagine the satisfying crack it would make if she squeezed just a little harder, could picture the scene it would cause. Blood on Italian marble, scandal tearing through every social circle they'd fought to infiltrate, their carefully constructed empire crumbling because she couldn't control her rage for 30 seconds. Or she could smile, set down the glass, and burn them both so thoroughly that nothing would be left but ash. Genevieve Stone had built kingdoms in the dark, and she'd be damned if some pregnant graduate student was going to take hers. She smiled. "How lovely," Genevieve said, her voice a blade wrapped in silk. "Alaric, darling, why don't you pour us all a drink? I think we have so much to discuss." Alaric Stone had always been 2 men living in one body, and Genevieve had loved both versions with a devotion that now felt like weakness. There was the husband who'd wake at dawn to bring her espresso in bed, who'd trace the curve of her spine with those tattooed fingers while whispering promises about the empire they'd build together. The man who'd held her through 3 miscarriages, his brutal hands surprisingly gentle as he pressed his forehead to hers and swore that she was enough, that a child didn't define their legacy. Then there was the other Alaric, the one who walked into smoke-filled warehouses with blood already on his cuffs, who could negotiate a truce over dinner and order an execution before dessert arrived. The kingpin who'd consolidated 5 territories under the Stone name through strategic violence and carefully placed bribes. That Alaric didn't apologize, didn't explain, and certainly didn't ask permission. What Genevieve hadn't realized until now was that there'd been a 3rd version all along. The man who could look her in the eyes every morning while building an entirely separate life 20 minutes away in Newark. She'd started digging the morning after Roxanne's little performance. While Alaric was at his downtown office, Genevieve had called in favors from her father's old crew. Men who understood that loyalty to the daughter of Patrick O'Brien meant more than whatever protection the Stone name offered. The brownstone on Garside Street had been purchased 18 months ago. Cash transaction, hidden under an LLC that traced back to the Stone Foundation's discretionary fund. 3 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, nursery already painted in soft yellow. The neighbors thought a young couple was moving in. They'd seen Alaric's Mercedes parked outside at least twice a week for the past 4 months. For months, while Genevieve had been managing his political connections, hosting dinners for senators and judges, ensuring that every dirty deal got laundered through legitimate channels, Alaric had been playing house with a woman barely older than their foundation interns. The financial records painted an even uglier picture. Monthly transfers of $25,000 into an account under Roxanne's name. A trust fund established in October, 3 months into the pregnancy, with the Stone estate as collateral. Prenatal care at the most exclusive practice in Manhattan, billed to one of their shell companies. He'd been meticulous, strategic. The same cold calculation he brought to business deals and territorial negotiations, now applied to replacing her. Drop a comment if you've ever discovered that the person you trusted most had an entire life you knew nothing about. Genevieve sat in her home office, printouts of bank statements and property records spread across the mahogany desk like evidence at a crime scene. Her hands didn't shake anymore. The shock had crystallized into something harder, sharper. Alaric had taught her everything she knew about power. How to identify weakness, how to exploit leverage, how to dismantle an opponent so thoroughly they never saw the killing blow coming. He'd been an excellent teacher. Now she just had to decide whether to destroy the father of Roxanne's child, or the empire he'd built on her family's blood and her strategic brilliance. The office door opened. Alaric stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. Genevieve smiled, cold and precise. "Yes, darling. I think we do." Next, the paper trail. Genevieve discovers just how deep Alaric's betrayal goes, and the millions he's hidden where he thought she'd never look. The Stone Foundation had been Genevieve's creation, her masterpiece of transformation. She'd taken Alaric's blood money and turned it into scholarships, community centers, political donations that bought influence instead of territory. 5 years of work, building legitimacy one strategic grant at a time. Now she was tearing through its financial records like a prosecutor building a case, and what she found made her want to set the entire penthouse on fire. The Community Outreach Initiative that had launched last spring wasn't funding after-school programs in Newark. It was a shell account funneling $200,000 monthly into something called the Hale Family Trust. Alaric's signature on every transfer, dated and authorized with the same methodical precision he brought to every business decision. Genevieve's accountant, Patricia Reeves, sat across from her looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past hour. The woman had been with them since the foundation's inception, loyal and discreet. Now her hands trembled as she turned pages in the leather-bound ledger. "Mrs. Stone, I need you to understand. I didn't know what these accounts were for. Mr. Stone handles certain discretionary funds personally, and I was instructed not to." "How much total?" Genevieve's voice cut through the explanation like ice. Patricia's throat worked. "As of this morning? $4.3 million. Transferred over the past 8 months. 8 months. The exact timeline of Roxanne's pregnancy." Genevieve felt something crack inside her chest, but her face remained perfectly composed. She'd learned from the best how to keep her expression neutral while her world burned. "What else?" "There's a property trust. The estate, as you know, but also the vacation house in Cape May, and..." Patricia's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "A life insurance policy. $20 million. The beneficiary was changed 3 months ago from you to Baby Hale. Legal name to be determined upon birth." The room tilted. Genevieve gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white against the dark wood. Alaric hadn't just planned for Roxanne's child. He'd systematically erased Genevieve from their financial future, piece by piece, transaction by transaction. Subscribe if you want to see how far Genevieve's willing to go for revenge, because what she discovers next changes everything. "Show me every account he's accessed in the past year," Genevieve said, her voice deadly calm. Every property, every shell company, every numbered account in the Caymans. I want to see the entire empire. Patricia nodded, fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. But it was what she said next that made Genevieve's blood run cold. Mrs. Stone, there's something else. A wire transfer scheduled for next week. $5 million to a law firm in Manhattan. Their specialty is, she paused, checking the screen, high net worth divorce proceedings. Alaric wasn't just building a life with Roxanne. He was preparing to legally end his life with Genevieve. And he'd been planning it for months while kissing her goodnight and promising her forever. The rage that swept through her was so pure it felt almost like clarity. Genevieve Stone had spent 7 years making her husband untouchable. She knew where every body was buried, every bribe was paid, every illegal dollar was laundered. And now she was going to use that knowledge to bury him. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m. Lotus Garden. Come alone. Roxanne wanted to talk. Roxanne Hale arrived at Genevieve's foundation office at exactly 2 o'clock, walking through the glass doors like she owned the building. She wore cream-colored maternity pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than her graduate school tuition. Her dark hair swept into an effortless bun that made her look older, more polished than the intern Genevieve remembered, more dangerous. Genevieve didn't stand when her assistant showed Roxanne in. She remained seated behind her desk, a position of power she'd learned from watching Alaric negotiate with men who thought they could intimidate him. Let them come to you. Make them cross your territory. Mrs. Stone. Roxanne settled into the leather chair across from her, one hand resting on her belly in that gesture Genevieve had come to hate. Thank you for meeting with me. You demanded I come alone to a public restaurant, then changed the location to my office. Genevieve's smile was razor-sharp. That's not a request. That's a power play. Roxanne had the audacity to look impressed. I can see why Alaric married you. You don't miss anything, do you? Apparently I missed you spreading your legs for my husband, so I'm not as observant as I thought. The crude words hung in the air between them. Roxanne didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her Birkin bag, a gift from Alaric, no doubt, and pulled out a manila folder. She slid it across the desk with the confidence of someone holding a winning hand. I'm not here to trade insults, Roxanne said. I'm here to offer you a way out that preserves your dignity. Genevieve opened the folder. Divorce papers already drawn up by Bennett and Cross, the most aggressive family law firm in New York. Her name printed on the respondent line like an afterthought. Attached behind them were photocopies of documents that made her stomach drop, shipping manifests from the port operations, wire transfers with notes about product distribution, text messages between Alaric and his lieutenants discussing the Newark situation. Evidence. Enough to bring federal charges. Where did you get these? Genevieve's voice was ice. Alaric talks in his sleep. Roxanne leaned back, her expression almost sympathetic. And he keeps terrible passwords on his personal laptop. I've been collecting insurance since the pregnancy test came back positive. I'm not stupid, Mrs. Stone. I know what kind of man I'm having a baby with. Have you ever met someone so calculated they made your blood run cold? Drop a comment. So this is blackmail. This is pragmatism. Roxanne's hand moved to her belly again, a protective gesture that felt rehearsed. Sign the papers. Walk away with the settlement Alaric's offering. It's generous, $3 million plus the Cape May house. Or I send copies of everything in that folder to the FBI field office in Newark. Your husband goes to prison, his empire crumbles, and you lose everything anyway. Genevieve studied the woman across from her. 26 years old, pregnant, and threatening to destroy a criminal organization that had taken decades to build. Either Roxanne was the bravest person she'd ever met, or the most foolish. You think the feds will protect you? Genevieve asked softly. You think becoming a federal witness against the Stone family will keep you and that baby safe? Something flickered in Roxanne's eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition that she'd underestimated the woman she was trying to replace. "I think I'm holding all the cards," Roxanne said, but her voice wavered just slightly. "And I think you're smart enough to know when you've lost." Genevieve closed the folder, her mind already calculating, strategizing. Roxanne had made a critical mistake. She'd shown her hand before the game was over. "I'll consider your offer," Genevieve said. "Give me 48 hours. Roxanne stood, smoothing her blouse over her stomach. 48 hours. Then I will make the decision for you." After she left, Genevieve sat in the silence of her office. The divorce papers and evidence spread before her like a death sentence. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. "Daddy," she said when Patrick O'Brien answered. "I need the family." The Emerald Bay Casino sat on the Atlantic City boardwalk like a relic from another era, its green neon sign flickering against the gray October sky. Genevieve hadn't been back here in 7 years. Not since her father had semi-retired and handed over operations to her Uncle Brennan. The O'Brien crew had ruled the southern Jersey coast for 3 generations before Alaric Stone ever set foot in the state. A fact her husband seemed to have conveniently forgotten. Brennan O'Brien waited for her in the private room above the casino floor, surrounded by men whose faces belonged to her childhood. Her father's lieutenants, soldiers who'd bounced her on their knees and taught her how to count cards before she turned 10. They stood when she entered old-world respect that the Stone organization had never shown her. "Jenny girl." Brennan pulled her into an embrace that smelled like whiskey and cigar smoke. He was 63 now, silver-haired and thick around the middle, but his eyes were still sharp as broken glass. "Your father would have come himself, but his doctor says the drive's too much for his heart." "How is he?" Furious that Alaric Stone thinks he can disrespect Patrick O'Brien's daughter and still breathe our air. Brennan gestured to the chair at the head of the table. "Sit. Tell us what you need." Genevieve laid out everything. The mistress, the pregnancy, the money Alaric had funneled away, the divorce papers backed by federal evidence. When she finished, the room was silent except for the distant sound of slot machines ringing below. Tommy Fitzgerald, her father's oldest friend, spoke first. "The ports, the distribution network through Newark, the protection we provide for his shipments coming through our docks." His Irish accent thickened with anger. "All of that was the dowry when you married him. Territory we controlled, contacts we'd spent decades building. We gave Alaric Stone the keys to the kingdom because he was family. And now he wants to throw away that family for some pregnant college girl," Brennan added, his voice deadly quiet, "while keeping everything we gave him." Genevieve leaned forward. "I need leverage. Something that reminds him what happens when he forgets where his power came from." Brennan exchanged glances with the other men. A decision passed between them without words, the kind of silent communication that came from decades of working outside the law. "The shipment coming through Port Elizabeth next week," Brennan said. $2 million in product, already paid for by Alaric's buyers in Manhattan. What if it never makes it past the docks? You'd intercept it? We'd hold it. Insurance, let's call it. Tommy's smile was cold. "Until Mr. Stone remembers his manners and his marriage vows." It was dangerous, the kind of move that could start a war between families. But Genevieve was past caring about danger. Alaric had already declared war the moment he signed those trust documents. "There's something else," Brennan said, sliding a folder across the table. "We've been doing some asking around about your husband's girlfriend. Roxanne Hale isn't just some graduate student who got lucky." Genevieve opened the folder, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Roxanne's graduate thesis advisor, FBI Special Agent David Kellerman. Her internship before the Stone Foundation. 3 months at the Department of Justice. A deleted Instagram photo from 2 years ago showing her at a federal law enforcement training seminar. "Your husband's mistress," Brennan said quietly, "might be a federal plant." Alaric came home with roses and regret, both equally worthless to Genevieve now. She heard him before she saw him, his footsteps heavy on the marble as he climbed the stairs to their bedroom. It was past midnight, late enough that he probably thought she'd be asleep, vulnerable. Instead, she sat at her vanity in a black silk robe, the tiny recording device Patricia had acquired hidden in the jewelry box behind her, already running. Jen, his voice was rough, exhausted. He set the roses on the dresser and crossed to her, dropping to his knees beside her chair like a penitent at confession. Those tattooed hands reached for hers. "I've been a fool." Genevieve let him take her hands but didn't squeeze back. "Have you?" The thing with Roxanne, it was a mistake, a moment of weakness that spiraled out of control. He pressed his forehead against her knuckles, and she felt the dampness there. Was he actually crying? "I never meant for any of this to happen. The baby, the complications, watching you hurt like this." Complications. The word tasted like acid. "Is that what you call getting your mistress pregnant and signing over our estate to her child?" "I was trying to handle the situation without destroying what we have." Alaric looked up at her, his gray eyes bloodshot and desperate. In this light, he looked older than his 42 years. "She threatened to go public, to ruin everything we've built. The trust fund, the property transfers, it was damage control, not a choice." Genevieve had to hand it to him. He almost sounded convincing. "So you signed away my home to protect our reputation?" She kept her voice soft, curious, letting him talk. The device was recording every word, every admission. "To protect you." His grip tightened on her hands. "Jen, you're the only woman I've ever actually loved. Roxanne she was available, young, and I was weak. But she's not you. She could never be you. Does she know that? Because when she came to my office yesterday, she seemed quite confident that she was about to become the next Mrs. Stone." Alaric's expression darkened. "She came to you? With divorce papers and a lovely collection of evidence about your business operations. She's quite thorough, your little mistake." Genevieve watched his face carefully. "Tell me something, darling. How much does Roxanne actually know about what you do?" "Nothing." "I've been careful." "Have you?" "Because she seems to have detailed shipping manifests, wire transfer records, text messages about the Newark distribution network." Genevieve pulled her hands free and stood, forcing him to look up at her. "Either you've been pillow-talking our entire operation to a woman you barely know, or she's been digging. Which is it?" Alaric's face went pale. "She wouldn't." "Wouldn't what? Betray you? Use you? Lie about her intentions?" Genevieve laughed, cold and sharp. "Tell me, Alaric, what does that feel like?" He stood, reaching for her. "Jen, please. I'll end it. I'll make Roxanne sign an NDA, pay her whatever she wants to disappear. Just tell me what you need to forgive me." "What I need," Genevieve said, letting him pull her close, letting him think his touch still affected her, "is for you to tell me the truth. All of it. When did it start? How many times? Does she know about the port operations?" And because Alaric Stone was a man who believed his charm could fix anything, he told her everything. The affair that started last February. The pregnancy wasn't an accident but a calculated move on Roxanne's part. The pillow talks about shipments and territories that he'd dismissed as harmless. Every word captured on the device behind her, insurance for the war that was coming. When he finally left to shower, Genevieve retrieved the recording and sent it to 3 different secure locations. Then she texted Brennan, "Move up the timeline. We strike tomorrow." The board meeting took place in the back room of Salvatore's, a restaurant in Hoboken where the Stone organization had been conducting business since Alaric's father ran things. 8 men sat around a table scarred with cigarette burns and decades of bloody negotiations, their faces carved from the same stone as their reputations. Genevieve wasn't supposed to be there. Wives didn't attend board meetings, didn't hear the unfiltered truth about shipments and territories and the violence required to maintain both. But Brennan O'Brien had insisted, and since the O'Briens controlled the ports that made everyone at this table rich, no one argued. She sat in the corner, silent and observing, while Alaric stood at the head of the table looking like a man facing execution. 6 months, said Joseph Castellano, the oldest member of the board and the one with the deepest connections to the New York families. Your mistress has been walking around Jersey City with her belly out for everyone to see, and now the whispers are starting about how Alaric Stone can't control his own household. It's contained, Alaric said, but his voice lacked conviction. Contained. Polly D'Angelo laughed, harsh and mocking. My wife's hairdresser knows about it. My daughter's friends at Rutgers are talking about it. This isn't contained, Alaric. This is a public humiliation. Brennan leaned back in his chair, his voice deceptively casual. The shipment that was supposed to come through Port Elizabeth last week. The one worth $2 million to your Manhattan buyers. It's sitting in a warehouse under O'Brien protection. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. You're holding my product? Alaric's hands flattened on the table, knuckles white. Our product, Brennan corrected. Since we provide the docks, the union contacts, and the routes that keep federal eyes looking elsewhere. And we're holding it until you remember what marriage means. What family means. Joseph nodded slowly. The New York families are asking questions. They want to know if you're compromised. If this girl has information that could bring heat down on all of us. She doesn't know anything. She knows enough to threaten your wife with federal evidence, Polly interrupted. Which means either you've been sloppy, or she's law enforcement. Either way, you've created a problem that affects all of our operations. Tommy Fitzgerald spoke up from beside Brennan. There's also the matter of succession. You've put the Stone estate in trust for a baby that isn't born to your legitimate wife. That sends a message about who you value, who you trust. The Irish gave you territory when you married Jenny, Brennan added. Port access, political connections, protection from the families that wanted to crush you when your father died. All because Patrick O'Brien's daughter was your wife. You divorce her, you lose all of that. Alaric's jaw worked. His eyes found Genevieve's across the room, and she saw the moment he understood. This wasn't just about marriage or betrayal. This was about power, and he was losing it. What do you want? He asked Brennan. End it. Publicly. Make it clear that Roxanne Hale means nothing. That Genevieve Stone is your wife and your partner. Brennan's voice hardened. Or we end our arrangement, take our ports back, and let the New York families know that the Stone organization is vulnerable. Joseph leaned forward. You have 72 hours, Alaric. Send the girl away with whatever money keeps her quiet. Fix your marriage. Or we find someone else to run Jersey operations. The meeting ended in tense silence. As the men filed out, Genevieve remained seated, watching her husband's world crumble around him. Alaric approached her slowly, like she was something dangerous he didn't know how to handle anymore. Did you orchestrate this? He asked quietly. Genevieve smiled. I simply reminded people where your power actually comes from. The rest was their decision. His phone buzzed. A text message that made his face go gray. Roxanne's in labor, he said. 3 weeks early. She's at St. Barnabas. Genevieve came home from a foundation meeting to find moving boxes stacked in the guest house, and Roxanne Hale arranging baby clothes in what used to be the storage room. The audacity was almost impressive. What the hell do you think you're doing? Genevieve stood in the doorway, her voice lethal calm. Roxanne didn't even look up from folding a tiny onesie. Alaric said I could stay here until the baby comes. The brownstone doesn't feel safe anymore, and he wants to be close when I go into labor. Alaric said. Genevieve stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood like gunshots. This is my home, not a halfway house for your convenience. It's his home too. Roxanne finally met her eyes, one hand resting protectively on her enormous belly. The baby had dropped, Genevieve noticed. Labor was imminent. And he invited me. Take it up with your husband if you have a problem. Oh, I will. Right after I have security remove your belongings and change all the access codes. Roxanne's composure cracked slightly. You can't do that. I'm carrying his child. You're carrying leverage, Genevieve corrected. Let's not pretend this pregnancy is about love. You've been using that baby as a weapon since the moment the test came back positive. And you've been using this marriage as a prison. Roxanne set down the onesie and turned fully to face her. Do you think Alaric loves you? Really loves you? Or does he just love what you represent? The legitimacy, the political connections, the pretty wife who makes him look respectable at fundraisers. The words landed like acid. Genevieve felt her composure waver for just a second before she locked it back down. At least I'm his wife. You're just the girl he used when he was bored. The girl he chose to have a child with, Roxanne shot back. When was the last time he touched you, Genevieve? Really touched you. Not just going through the motions because that's what married people do. Genevieve's hand twitched toward the vase on the side table. It would be so easy. One swing, one moment of violence, and this problem would disappear along with Roxanne's smug expression. He was with me last night, Genevieve said instead, her voice like ice, begging for forgiveness, promising to make you disappear. Should I play you the recording? Roxanne's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. Words are easy. Actions matter. And the action he took was signing over his estate to my baby. The action he took was moving me into his home while you stood there pretending you still have power. You think living in the guest house makes you family? Genevieve laughed, sharp and cruel. You're the help, Roxanne. Temporary accommodations until Alaric figures out how to pay you off and send you away. I'm the mother of his son. Roxanne's voice rose, emotional now. I'm giving him the heir you never could. That matters more than any piece of paper or any Irish connection your family provided. The silence that followed was devastating. Genevieve moved so close she could smell Roxanne's perfume, see the fear flickering beneath her defiance. You made a mistake coming into my home. An even bigger mistake thinking you could replace me. I already have, Roxanne whispered. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the penthouse. Alaric's voice called out, tense and wary. Jen? Roxanne? Where are you? Both women stared at each other, neither willing to look away first. Let's ask him, Genevieve said softly. Let's ask Alaric who he really wants. Right now. Final answer. Roxanne's hand went to her belly, and Genevieve saw the calculation in her eyes. The baby was the trump card, the biological reality that couldn't be argued with. Unless Genevieve had a card Roxanne didn't know about. Alaric, Genevieve called out, her voice carrying through the penthouse. We need to talk. All three of us. Right now. They sat in the penthouse living room like opposing generals at a peace negotiation destined to end in bloodshed. Alaric on the leather sofa, Roxanne to his left with her hand on her belly, Genevieve to his right with a manila folder in her lap. The city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind them, beautiful and indifferent to the violence about to unfold. This ends tonight, Genevieve said, her voice cutting through the tension. No more games. No more lies. You choose Alaric. Right now. Alaric's tattooed hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Jen, this isn't fair. She laughed cold and sharp. You're right. It's not fair that I spent 7 years building your legitimacy while you built a secret family. But here we are. Roxanne leaned forward, her expression desperate but calculated. Alaric, I'm having contractions. Real ones this time. The baby could come tonight, tomorrow. Your son. She emphasized the last word like a weapon. Are you really going to choose her over your own child? Don't, Genevieve warned. Don't you dare use that baby as emotional blackmail. It's not blackmail. It's biology. Roxanne's eyes filled with tears that looked almost genuine. I'm carrying the stone heir. The son you promised your father you'd have. The legacy that matters more than anything. Alaric's face crumpled slightly. Genevieve could see him weakening, the pull of fatherhood and bloodline overriding everything else. Time to play her cards. Tell him, Genevieve said to Roxanne, her voice deceptively soft. Tell Alaric who your thesis advisor was at Rutgers. Roxanne's tears stopped. Her face went carefully blank. Tell him about David Kellerman. FBI Special Agent David Kellerman. Genevieve opened the folder and pulled out the photographs. Roxanne at a federal law enforcement seminar. Roxanne having coffee with Kellerman 3 weeks before she started her internship at the Stone Foundation. Tell him how you've been collecting evidence since the beginning. Alaric turned to Roxanne, his expression transforming from anguish to something much more dangerous. What is she talking about? Those photos don't mean anything, Roxanne said quickly. Kellerman was my professor, that's all. Your professor who specializes in organized crime prosecution. Genevieve pulled out another document. The same professor who's been building a RICO case against the Stone organization for the past 2 years. The same agent who would love to have an inside source. Someone close to Alaric. Someone he'd trust with information. That's insane. Is it? Genevieve looked at Alaric. She pushed for this pregnancy. She documented everything. She has evidence that she's been threatening me with. And now she's living in your home, recording every conversation, every admission. She paused, letting it sink in. She's not your mistress, Alaric. She's a federal informant. The silence was absolute. Roxanne stood abruptly, her face flushed. You don't know what you're talking about. I love him. The baby is real. The baby is real, Genevieve agreed. The perfect cover for a long-term operation. Who would suspect a pregnant graduate student? Alaric rose slowly, his movements predatory. Roxanne, look at me. She did, and Genevieve saw the moment the mask slipped. Fear. Raw and unmistakable. Is any of this true? His voice was deadly quiet. Alaric. The baby is yours. That part is real. Answer the question. Roxanne's hand moved to her belly, protective and desperate. I had a job to do at first, but then I fell in love with you. Everything changed. The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. Alaric turned to Genevieve, and she saw something shift in his expression. Calculation. The same cold ruthlessness that had built his empire. What do you want? He asked his wife. Genevieve smiled. Everything. The penthouse was silent except for Roxanne's ragged breathing and the distant sound of the city below. Alaric stood at the window, his back to both women, his reflection ghostly in the glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was empty of everything except cold calculation. How far along is the federal investigation? Roxanne's face crumpled. Alaric, please. Answer me. He still hadn't turned around. How much do they have? Enough for indictments, she whispered. But I haven't given them anything yet. I swear. The baby changed everything. I was going to tell you. When? After you'd testified? After you'd put me in prison and raised my son on government witness protection money. Now he turned, and the man looking at Roxanne wasn't the charming husband or the passionate lover. This was the kingpin who'd consolidated 5 territories through strategic violence. You played me. I fell in love with you, Roxanne said desperately, tears streaming down her face. That wasn't fake. The baby wasn't fake. But everything else was. Alaric's voice was flat. Final. Get out of my house. What about the baby? Your son will be provided for. Through lawyers. Through accounts you'll never be able to trace back to me. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Dominic, I need a clean car at the penthouse in 10 minutes. We're relocating a guest. He hung up. You have until my driver arrives to pack whatever you brought. Roxanne looked at Genevieve, something like desperation in her eyes. You did this. You poisoned him against his own child. I saved his life, Genevieve corrected. Something you were actively trying to destroy. The baby is innocent in this. Then you should have thought about that before you used your pregnancy as cover for a federal investigation. Genevieve stood, smoothing her dress with deliberate calm. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow with a settlement offer. You'll sign an NDA, relinquish any claim to the stone name, and disappear. In exchange, you and the baby will be financially secure for life. And if I refuse? Alaric finally looked at her, and Roxanne flinched at what she saw in his eyes. Then we'll have a very different conversation, the kind that involves accidents and unfortunate outcomes. Your choice. 10 minutes later, Roxanne was gone. The guest house empty. The penthouse restored to its original elegance, as if she'd never existed at all. Genevieve poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Alaric. He took it but didn't drink, just stared at the amber liquid like it held answers. You knew, he said finally. How long? About her being federal? 3 days. I had my father's crew investigate when something felt wrong. Genevieve took a slow sip. About the affair? The moment you started coming home smelling like someone else's perfume. Why didn't you confront me sooner? Because I needed you to see it yourself. To understand what happens when you forget who built this empire. She set down her glass and moved closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous and intimate. The ports are still under O'Brien control. The board answers to me now, not you. The accounts you thought were hidden? I've had access for months. Alaric's jaw tightened. So this was a coup. This was a reminder. Genevieve placed her hand over his tattooed knuckles. You are the king, Alaric. But I'm the one who built the throne. I'm the one with the connections that keep you legitimate. I'm the one who just saved you from federal prison. At what cost? Your freedom. She smiled, and it was the coldest expression he'd ever seen on her face. From now on, every decision goes through me. Every shipment, every deal, every dollar. You wanted to know what I want? I want what I've always deserved. Real power. Not the performance of being your wife, but actual control. And if I refuse? Then I call Brennan, and the O'Briens take back everything they gave you. I call the board, and they vote you out. I call my lawyers, and I file for divorce with documentation of every illegal transaction you've made in the past 7 years. Her fingers tightened on his. You're a brilliant strategist, Alaric. Do the math. He did. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the understanding that she'd outmaneuvered him completely. For the first time in their marriage, Alaric Stone looked at his wife and saw an equal. No, saw someone more dangerous than himself. Partners? He asked, his voice rough. Partners, Genevieve agreed. But I hold the keys. She kissed him then, claiming him the way he'd once claimed her. A promise and a threat wrapped in one gesture. When she pulled back, Alaric's expression had shifted to something like admiration mixed with fear. You're terrifying, he said. I learned from the best. Drop a comment if you believe loyalty and respect should go both ways. Only people like Roxanne, who weaponize babies and betray trust, wouldn't comment. Thanks for watching Empire Stories. Hit subscribe if you believe in queens who take back their crowns, because we've got more stories that'll leave you breathless.